I still remember the exact moment my daughter-in-law Lisa's face changed. 1 second she was standing in my living room, finger pointed at my chest, her voice bouncing off the walls. "You have no voice here, Margaret. This house is going to be OURS, and you'll be in Sunny Pines by Christmas." The next second, my attorney, Rachel, was sliding that manila folder across my coffee table, the one with the trust documents I'd kept secret for 3 years. Lisa's eyes darted across the first page, then widened like she'd seen a ghost. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. 3 years of her vicious comments, manipulation, and lies silenced by a single piece of paper. I'll never forget that blessed silence, or the smell of her expensive perfume suddenly turning sour with fear. I wasn't always the kind of woman who could stand up for herself. For 47 years, I bent over backward for my family, especially after my Robert died. I cooked the holiday meals nobody appreciated, babysit grandchildren on short notice, and kept quiet when my opinions weren't welcome. I lived in fear of being a burden. "Don't rock the boat, Margaret," I'd tell myself. But that Thursday afternoon in April, with my hands still trembling and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, I finally understood what true power felt like. And I knew there was no going back to the way things were before. How did a 60-year-old widow who spent her life avoiding confrontation end up taking back control from the woman who almost destroyed her family? It wasn't easy, and it wasn't pretty. I paid a high price to learn that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you should trust the least. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, before Lisa showed her true colors, before my son Michael stopped looking me in the eye, before I found myself alone in a house that no longer felt like mine. Michael met Lisa at a charity fundraiser in the summer of 2019. He was 42 and had never been married, something I'd stopped mentioning at church years before. The right woman will come along when God decides it's time, I'd say when the ladies from my Bible study group asked about Michael's love life. And truth be told, I'd started to believe he might stay single forever. Michael had always been cautious, taking his time with decisions big and small. When he was 6, he once spent 45 minutes deciding between 2 flavors of ice cream. Robert used to tease him about it. "Son, by the time you make up your mind, the whole darn parlor will have melted." But that carefulness served him well in his career as an investment advisor. His clients loved how thoroughly he researched every option before making recommendations. So when Michael called me one Sunday evening, excitement bubbling in his voice, to tell me he'd met someone special, I was both surprised and delighted. "Her name is Lisa, Mum. She works in real estate. I think you're really going to like her." 2 weeks later, he brought her to Sunday dinner at my house. I remember opening the door and seeing this tall, striking woman with perfect blonde hair and a smile that lit up her whole face. She was wearing a blue dress that looked like it cost more than my monthly Social Security check and carrying a bouquet of Lilamai's favorite flowers. "Michael told me all about you, Mrs. Wilson. I'm so excited to finally meet you," she said, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like expensive perfume. Something about her felt a bit too perfect, too rehearsed, but I pushed the thought aside. My son was happier than I'd seen him in years. Over homemade pot roast Roberts, old recipe, Lisa charmed me with stories about growing up in Connecticut, her move to Arizona for college, and finally settling in our town 5 years ago when her real estate career took off. "I sold $3 million properties last month alone," she mentioned, cutting her meat into tiny, precise pieces. She asked thoughtful questions about my garden, about Robert, about the family photos on my mantle. When Michael excused himself to take a work call, Lisa leaned forward and placed her hand on mine. "I want you to know how much I respect family, Mrs. Wilson. Michael talks about you with such love. I would never want to come between that." Her green eyes looked so sincere that I felt ashamed of my earlier reservations. After they left that evening, I sat in my favorite armchair, the one Robert and I picked out together 30 years ago, and allowed myself to imagine a future with grandchildren, with family Christmases that wouldn't feel so empty. Maybe God had finally sent the right woman for my Michael. I called my sister Janet that night, bubbling with excitement. "She's accomplished, Janet, beautiful, and she seems to really care about family." Janet laughed. "Well, it's about time Michael found someone." I was starting to think he was married to those spreadsheets of his. I stayed up late that night, leafing through old photo albums, imagining new pages filled with wedding photos and babies. How could I have known that within 18 months, that same woman would be trying to push me out of my own home and my son's life? The engagement happened faster than I expected. Just 4 months after that first dinner, Michael brought Lisa to my house on a crisp October evening, both of them glowing with news they could barely contain. Lisa thrust her left hand forward the moment I opened the door, a diamond the size of a small marble catching the porch light. "We're getting married, Margaret," she squealed, using my first name for the first time. Something about the way she said it felt off, but Michael looked so happy that I pushed the thought away and hugged them both. "I'm so happy for you," I said, meaning it despite the tiny knot of unease forming in my stomach. That night, as we celebrated with champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion, Lisa dominated the conversation with wedding plans. "We're thinking June," she said, scrolling through venue options on her phone. "A big ceremony, at least 200 guests." Michael nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When I mentioned that Robert and I had married in the small chapel downtown with just 30 guests, Lisa barely looked up. "That's sweet, Margaret, but times have changed. We're thinking the Grand Mesa Resort. It's $60,000 for the basic package, but Michael's bonus should cover most of it." The knot in my stomach tightened. As the wedding planning progressed, I began noticing subtle shifts in Lisa's behavior toward me. The thoughtful questions about my life disappeared, replaced by thinly veiled criticisms. "Margaret, you really should update those curtains. They're so dated. Or don't you think it's time to try a new hairstyle? Something more youthful?" She'd say these things with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, often when Michael wasn't in earshot. When he was around, she was the perfect, doting fiancée, always touching his arm or laughing at his jokes. He seemed enthralled, unable to see what was happening right in front of him. The wedding was exactly as Lisa had planned: elaborate, expensive, and exhausting. 237 guests, most of whom I'd never met, filled the ballroom at the Grand Mesa Resort. My small family contingent, her husband Bill, and my 3 cousins from Ohio looked out of place among Lisa's glamorous friends and business associates. I wore a pale blue dress Lisa had helped me select, though helped meant dismissing every option I liked until I agreed to the one she preferred. "Trust me, Margaret, this is much more appropriate for the mother of the groom," she'd said, her tone making it clear that my choices were embarrassingly outdated. During the reception, I found myself seated at a table far from the wedding party, with distant relatives of Lisa's I'd never met. When I approached Michael to ask if I could give a toast I'd written and rehearsed one for weeks, Lisa intercepted me. "Oh, Margaret, we've already finalized the speaking schedule. Maybe at the 1-year anniversary dinner." She patted my arm and glided away before I could respond. I watched my son dance with his new wife, looking happier than I'd ever seen him, and told myself to be grateful. This was his day, not mine. But as I sat alone at that table, picking at a slice of $15 per slice wedding cake, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. I just didn't realize how dramatic that shift would become. The first real sign of trouble came 3 months after the wedding. Michael and Lisa had bought a house in Lakeside Estates, an upscale neighborhood across town. I hadn't been invited to see it yet, despite dropping several hints. "We're still settling in, Mom," Michael would say whenever I brought it up. One Sunday, I baked Michael's favorite apple pie and decided to surprise them with a visit. I remember standing on their perfect porch, surrounded by professionally landscaped flower beds, feeling inexplicably nervous about seeing my own son. I rang the bell, pie still warm in my hands. Lisa opened the door, her smile dropping the instant she saw me. "Margaret, we weren't expecting you." Behind her, I glimpsed a dining room full of people, glasses of wine in hand, laughter hanging in the air. "Oh, I'm sorry," I stammered, suddenly feeling foolish with my homemade pie. "I didn't realize you were having company." Lisa didn't invite me in, just stood in the doorway, blocking my view. "Yes, some important clients of mine. Michael's networking. You understand." She reached for the pie. "I'll take that. Thank you for thinking of us," double quotes. Before I could respond, Michael appeared behind her, His eyes widened when he saw me, but not with pleasure. Mom, what are you doing here? There was something in his voice I'd never heard before when he spoke to me embarrassment. He glanced back at the gathering, then stepped onto the porch, partially closing the door behind him. We're in the middle of something important, he said, his voice low. You should have called first. I felt my cheeks flush with heat. I just thought, the pie is your favorite. My voice trailed off as I noticed Lisa watching me with what looked like satisfaction. Michael sighed. Next time, please call, okay? He took the pie, gave me a quick, awkward hug, and disappeared back inside. I stood there for a moment, listening to the laughter resume, before walking back to my car. I sat in the driveway for a full 5 minutes before I could stop my hands from shaking enough to drive. That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since Robert died. After that, the invitations to Sunday dinner at my house grew less frequent. When they did come over, Lisa would find fault with everything, my cooking a little too much salt, isn't it? My housekeeping dust triggers my allergies, even the temperature, it's like an oven in here. Margaret, haven't you heard of central air? Michael, who had always defended me in the past, now stayed silent or, worse, agreed with her. Mom, Lisa's right. You should think about updating your kitchen. Those appliances have to be 20 years old. Each visit left me feeling more and more like a stranger in my son's life. One evening, after they'd left earlier than planned because Lisa suddenly developed a headache when I mentioned Thanksgiving plans, I called Janet in tears. I don't understand what's happening, I sobbed into the phone. It's like she's turning him against me. Janet, never one to mince words, sighed heavily. Maggie, I hate to say this, but she's isolating him. Classic manipulator move. She's got dollar signs in her eyes. You know Michael's doing well with that investment firm. I wanted to defend my son, to say he was too smart for that, but the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. Then came the conversation that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October, about a year after the wedding. I was in my garden, planting the bulbs that would become spring tulips, when Michael's car pulled into my driveway. He came alone, a rarity these days. Something about the set of his shoulders, the way he walked toward me with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, sent a wave of dread through me before he'd said a word. I brushed the dirt from my gardening gloves and stood to greet him. Michael, this is a surprise. Is everything okay? He couldn't look me in the eye. Mom, we need to talk about the future. Your future. He gestured toward the house. Can we go inside? At the kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and mourned Robert's passing, my son told me that he and Lisa had been discussing my living situation. We're concerned about you being here alone, Mom. The stairs, the maintenance. It's a lot for someone your age. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. My age. Michael, I'm 67, not 97. I manage just fine. He shifted uncomfortably. Lisa and I have been researching assisted living facilities. There's a nice one called Sunny Pines about 20 minutes from us. They have activities, medical staff on site. You'd have people your own age to talk to. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Sunny Pines, the nursing home. Michael winced. It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's a retirement community. There's a difference. I looked around my kitchenette, the faded yellow wallpaper Robert and I had picked out together, at the window overlooking the garden where my grandchildren would have played if life had worked out differently. This is my home, Michael. Your father and I bought this house when you were 3 years old. All my memories are here. His expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Mom, be reasonable. This house is too big for one person. It's worth a lot now with the way the market has gone up. If you sold it, you'd have more than enough to cover Sunny Pines for years. And then it clicked. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about money. Lisa put you up to this, didn't she? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael stood up abruptly. This isn't just Lisa. I'm concerned too. You're not getting any younger, and frankly, I don't have time to be driving across town checking on you all the time. The casual cruelty of his words took my breath away. I see, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. And what exactly would happen to this house if I moved to Sunny Pines? He couldn't meet my eyes. Well, obviously you'd sell it. Lisa knows the market. She could list it for you. Get you top dollar. Of course she could. Real estate agent Lisa, who'd been eyeing my 4-bedroom craftsman on a quarter-acre lot in a now desirable neighborhood. I felt something shift inside me, a lifetime of accommodation and people-pleasing, giving way to a cold, hard anger I'd never allowed myself to feel. I need time to think about this, I said, standing up to signal the end of the conversation. Michael looked relieved, clearly having expected more resistance. Take all the time you need, Mom. Lisa has some brochures in the car. I'll bring them by later this week. After he left, I sat at my kitchen table until the room grew dark, not bothering to turn on the lights. Was this what Robert and I had worked so hard for? To have our son try to ship me off to a retirement community while his wife sold our home out from under me? I thought about calling Janet but knew exactly what she'd say. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I started making notes, dates, comments, patterns of behavior, the gradual isolation, the missed family events, the constant criticisms, the real estate opportunity my home represented. I wrote until my hand cramped, filling page after page with evidence of what I'd been too blind or too afraid to see clearly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Robert would do in this situation. My husband had been the practical one, the planner, the one who handled our finances and made sure we were protected. Around 3 a.m., I remembered something: the locked file cabinet in Robert's old office. Before he died, he'd updated our will and set up some kind of trust. Just in case, Maggie, he'd said, kissing my forehead, so you'll always be taken care of. In the grief that followed his death, I'd signed whatever papers the attorney had put in front of me, but I'd never really understood the details. It was time to change that. The next morning, I called the attorney whose card I found in Robert's files, Rachel Goldstein. Her secretary sounded surprised when I explained who I was, Mrs. Wilson. Of course, Ms. Goldstein has been wondering when she'd hear from you. Let me see when she can fit you in. 2 days later, I was sitting in a downtown office with a view of the courthouse, watching a petite woman with salt and pepper hair review a thick file with my name on it. Margaret, I'm glad you called. I've been sending annual statements to your address, but when you never responded, I assumed you were working with another attorney. I felt a flush of embarrassment. I'm afraid I haven't been opening mail. I didn't understand. After Robert died, I just couldn't face some things. Rachel's expression softened. That's completely understandable. Grief can be paralyzing. She tapped the folder. But I think you'll be glad to know that Robert was very thorough in his planning. Let me explain what he set up for you. For the next hour, Rachel walked me through documents that revealed just how deeply my husband had cared for me and how well he'd known our son. The house is in a qualified personal residence trust, she explained. Robert transferred it to the trust, with you as the beneficiary with lifetime rights. Even if you wanted to sell it, you couldn't not without the approval of the successor trustee. And who's the successor trustee? I asked, overwhelmed by the legal terminology. Rachel smiled. You are, currently. Robert named you with the provision that if you were unable or unwilling to serve, his sister Janet would step in. Michael is specifically excluded from serving as trustee. My breath caught. Robert excluded our son. Rachel nodded, her expression careful. Your husband mentioned concerns about Michael's susceptibility to influence. He wanted to ensure your home would always remain your home, regardless of any future family dynamics. I felt tears well up, even from beyond the grave. Robert was protecting me. As Rachel continued explaining the details, I learned that Robert had left Michael a separate inheritance, one that would only become available to him at age 50, or if he remained unmarried. It's an incentive trust, Rachel explained. Not uncommon when there are concerns about potential spouses having undue influence. I thought about Lisa, with her designer clothes and her million-dollar property sales. Had Robert somehow sensed this coming? The trust also contained investments that had grown substantially since Robert's death. You have options, Margaret, Rachel said, closing the folder. More options than your son and daughter-in-law realize. On the drive home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. But with it came a terrible sadness. My own son had become someone I couldn't trust. How had I missed the signs? Had he always been this way? Or was Lisa's influence to blame? I thought back to the little boy who'd cry if he accidentally stepped on an ant, who'd saved his allowance to buy me a Mother's Day gift, who'd held my hand at his father's funeral and promised to always take care of me. Where had that Michael gone? When I arrived home, there was an unfamiliar car in my driveway. Lisa sat on my front porch, scrolling through her phone. My stomach tightened as I parked and slowly made my way toward her. Lisa, what a surprise. She looked up, her smile not reaching her eyes. Margaret, I thought I'd drop by with those brochures Michael mentioned. About Sunny Pines. She held up a glossy folder with pictures of smiling seniors playing shuffleboard. They have a waiting list, you know? We'd need to get your deposit in soon to hold your spot. I unlocked my front door, debating whether to invite her in. Something in me had shifted after my meeting with Rachel. I no longer felt the need to please this woman who had systematically worked to remove me from my son's life. But curiosity won out. I wanted to see just how far she would go. Would you like to come in for tea? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Lisa looked momentarily surprised, but followed me inside, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floors Robert had refinished by hand the year before he got sick. In my kitchen, as the kettle boiled, Lisa wasted no time launching into her pitch. So I've taken the liberty of running some numbers for you, she said, spreading papers across my table without asking permission. Your house should list for around $780,000 in the current market. I'd waive my commission, of course family discount. The casual way she discussed selling my home made my hand shake as I poured the tea. After paying off the remaining mortgage and setting aside the Sunny Pines deposit, you'd have a nice nest egg to supplement your Social Security. I nearly dropped the cup I was holding. Mortgage. Lisa, this house has been paid off for 12 years. Something flickered across her face, surprised, quickly masked. Oh, well, that's even better then. More money for your care. She tapped a brochure with her perfectly manicured nail. Sunny Pines starts at $4,300 a month for the basic studio apartment. But I really think you'd be happier in one of their one-bedroom units. Those run about $5,900 monthly, plus care levels as needed. I sipped my tea, calculating quickly. Even with Social Security and Robert's pension, those costs would drain any proceeds from a house sale within a decade. And what happens when that money runs out? I asked quietly. Lisa waved dismissively. Oh, there's always Medicaid for seniors who've spent down their assets. The cold calculation in her voice sent a chill through me. I was just a problem to be solved, an obstacle between her and my property. I'm not sure selling is the right decision for me, I said carefully. This house holds so many memories. Lisa's pleasant mask slipped, just for a moment. Margaret, let's be realistic. You can't maintain this place by yourself. The yard alone, I cut her off. I manage just fine. I have a service for the heavy yard work. She leaned forward, her voice taking on a harder edge. Michael and I are concerned about your safety. Just last month you mentioned feeling dizzy getting out of bed. What if you fell down these stairs? You could lie here for days before anyone found you. The fact that she knew about my private health conversation with Mikkel, something I'd mentioned in passing, not as a serious concern, told me they'd been discussing me, planning this. I appreciate your concern, I said, struggling to keep my tone neutral. But this is a decision I'll need to make on my own timeline. Lisa's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. Michael and I were hoping to resolve this before the holidays. We're thinking of starting a family soon, and we could really use the extra space. This house would be perfect once we renovate. And there, it was the real agenda. Laid bare. Not my well-being, but my home. The home where I'd raised my son, where I'd nursed my husband through cancer, where every corner held a piece of my heart. Starting a family, I repeated, genuinely surprised. Lisa had never mentioned wanting children before. She nodded, suddenly all warmth and smiles again. Yes, wouldn't you love to be closer to your grandchildren? Sunny Pines is just 20 minutes from our house. You could see the baby all the time. The manipulation was so transparent it would have been comical if it weren't so cruel. I see, was all I could manage. Lisa must have mistaken my quiet response for acquiescence because she pressed on, pulling out paperwork from her designer bag. I've taken the liberty of drafting up a listing agreement. Obviously, We'd need to do some staging, pack away some of these older pieces, but I could have this on the market by next week. I stared at the contract. She'd slid across my table, my name already printed on the seller line. The audacity took my breath away. You prepared this before even speaking with me. Lisa had the grace to look momentarily flustered. I just wanted to be prepared. Time is of the essence in this market. I stood up, my decision made. I think you should leave now, Lisa. I need time to consider my options. Her smile vanished. Margaret, you're not getting any younger. Michael and I are trying to help you before something happens and decisions get made for you. Adult Protective Services takes elder neglect very seriously. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air between us. I felt a surge of something unfamiliar, age, yes, but also a strange sense of clarity. Are you threatening me in my own home, Lisa? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. She backpedaled immediately. Of course not. I'm just concerned. We both are. She gathered her papers, clearly realizing she'd overplayed her hand. Just think about it, okay? For Michael's sake. At the door, she turned with one parting shot. You know he's under a lot of stress at work. Having to worry about you isn't helping. If you really love your son, you'll make this easy for him. After she left, I sank into Robert's old armchair, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me. The magnitude of what was happening hit me all at once. My daughter-in-law wasn't just pushy or controlling, she was actively working to take my home, to push me into a facility where I'd be out of sight and out of mind. And my son, my only child, was helping her. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called the one person I knew would understand. Janet, it's worse than we thought. I need your help. Janet arrived the next morning, suitcase in hand. I'm staying for a week, she announced, brushing past me into the house. Bill can fend for himself for a while. This is family emergency territory. My sister, 5 years my junior and twice as fierce, had always been my backbone when mine failed me. While I made us coffee, she paced my kitchen, furious after hearing the full story. The nerve of that woman. And Macaulay could just shake that boy until his teeth rattle. What is he thinking? I shook my head, still struggling to understand it myself. She has some kind of hold on him, Jan. He's not the son I raised anymore. Janet stopped pacing and fixed me with her no-nonsense stare. Well, what are you going to do about it? When I hesitated, she continued. Because if you do nothing, Maggie, they're going to bulldoze right over you. You know that, right? This isn't going to magically resolve itself. I told her about my meeting with Rachel Goldstein, about Robert's trust and the protections he'd put in place. Janet's expression softened. That wonderful, wonderful man. He knew, didn't he? Somehow, he knew Michael might be vulnerable to someone like Lisa. Over the next few days, Janet helped me develop a plan. First, we called Rachel and scheduled another meeting, this time bringing all the financial statements I'd ignored over the years. You're in a much stronger position than you realize, Margaret, Rachel explained, showing me account balances that took my breath away. Robert's investments had grown substantially. You have options. You can stay in your home as long as you wish. The trust guarantees that. But you should be prepared for pushback from Michael and Lisa when they realize their plan won't work. Janet, ever practical, suggested documentation. Start keeping a record. Maggie, dates, times, what was said. If they escalate this, and I suspect they might too, want evidence. So I began a journal, recording every interaction, every comment, every subtle threat. I installed a simple security camera at my front door. Janet's idea after. Lisa showed up unannounced twice more with updated brochures and thinly veiled suggestions that my mental acuity might be slipping. Just looking out for your best interests, Margaret, she'd say, while eyeing my living room like she was already measuring for new curtains. The confrontation I'd been dreading came 3 weeks later. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was expecting Rachel to drop by with updated trust documents for me to sign. Instead, Michael's car pulled into my driveway, with Lisa in the passenger seat. Through the window, I watched them having what appeared to be an intense conversation before approaching my door. Michael's face was set in grim determination, while Lisa kept touching his arm, nodding encouragingly. I took a deep breath and opened the door before they could knock. Michael, Lisa. This is a surprise. My son couldn't meet my eyes. Mom, We need to talk. It's important. I led them to the living room, feeling strangely calm despite my racing heart. Years of avoiding confrontation had left me ill-prepared for this moment, but something had shifted in me these past weeks. This was my home, my life, and I was done being manipulated. "What can I help you with?" I asked, sitting in Robert's chair while they took the sofa. Lisa immediately took control of the conversation. "Margaret, we've been patient, but it's been nearly a month since we discussed Sunny Pines. The waiting list is growing, and they won't hold a spot without a deposit." She pulled out the same glossy brochure, now dog-eared from repeated presentations. "Michael and I are prepared to help you pack and manage the move. We've even found a company that can handle estate sales for all these." She gestured vaguely at my furnishings. "Older items you won't have room for. The casual dismissal of my belongings, the table Robert had crafted by hand, the quilt my grandmother had mad ignited something in me. I'm not moving to Sunny Pines," I said quietly but firmly. Lisa's smile tightened. "Margaret, be reasonable. You can't manage this house alone." Michael finally spoke up. "Mom, Lisa's right. We're worried about you. Last week you forgot to return my call. What if it had been an emergency?" I stared at my son, hardly recognizing him. "Forgetting to return one phone call doesn't mean I need assisted living, Michael." He shifted uncomfortably. "It's not just that you're getting older. Things are only going to get harder." I looked between them, my son who couldn't meet my eyes, and the woman who was systematically destroying our relationship. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm staying in my home." Lisa's pleasant facade cracked. "This is ridiculous. You can barely maintain this place. The gutters need cleaning. The back step is wobbly. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen." I raised an eyebrow. "A lawsuit?" She flushed. "I mean, if someone got hurt, a mail carrier or delivery person." But her slip had revealed her thinking in terms of assets and liabilities, not family and care. Michael leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "Mom, we're trying to help you. Why are you fighting us on this?" I studied my son's face, searching for the boy I'd raised. "Help me, or help yourselves to my house." His eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" Lisa placed a warning hand on his arm, but I pressed on. "This house would sell for quite a bit now, wouldn't it, Lisa? Prime location, good bones. What was the number you quoted?" $780,000. Michael looked confused. "How did you?" Lisa cut him off. "I merely pointed out to your mother what a valuable asset she's sitting on, money that could be better used for her care." I folded my hands in my lap, struggling to keep my voice steady. "And when that money runs out, what then?" Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, Lisa jumped in. "That's years away, and there are programs for elderly care when funds are depleted." I turned to my son. "She means Medicaid, Michael. After I've spent everything I have, I'd go on public assistance. Is that what you want from me? To strip me of my home and savings until I qualify for welfare?" Michael paled. "No, of course not. That's not what we're—" Lisa interrupted again, her voice sharp. "You're twisting things, Margaret. We're trying to be practical about your care while you can still enjoy life, before difficult decisions have to be made for you." The threat was unmistakable, and it was the final straw. "I think it's time for you both to leave," I said, standing up. Lisa didn't move. "We're not done discussing this." Something in me snapped. Decades of being the peacemaker, of biting my tongue, of putting everyone else first, it all fell away in that moment. "Yes, we are. This is my house, mine, not yours, not Michael's, and I am not leaving it until I decide it's time. Not when you decide for me." Lisa stood, her face flushing with anger. "You have no voice here, Margaret. This house is going to be yours, and you'll be in Sunny Pines by Christmas." Her voice bounced off the walls, so loud that none of us heard the front door open. It wasn't until Rachel cleared her throat from the doorway that we all turned in surprise. "I apologize for interrupting," my attorney said calmly, "but I have an appointment with Mrs. Wilson." She approached, extending her hand to Lisa. "Rachel Goldstein, Mrs. Wilson's attorney, and you are—" The look of shock on Lisa's face was something I'll treasure until my dying day. "Attorney," she repeated, her voice suddenly uncertain. Michael stood up. "Mom, what's going on? Why do you need a lawyer?" Rachel set her briefcase on my coffee table. Mrs. Wilson asked me to review her estate plan, standard procedure for someone in her situation. She turned to me. I have those documents we discussed, Margaret. Would you like to review them now, or should I come back another time? I made a decision in that moment. No more hiding, no more avoiding conflict. Now is perfect, Rachel. Michael and Lisa were just leaving. Lisa hadn't moved, her eyes fixed on the briefcase. What documents? She demanded. Rachel raised an eyebrow. That's privileged information between me and my client. Unless Mrs. Wilson wishes to share. I nodded slowly. I think it's time they understood the situation. Rachel opened her briefcase and removed a manila folder, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. I opened it, then turned it so Michael and Lisa could see the first page. This is the qualified personal residence trust your father set up before he died. I explained to Michael. It means I have lifetime rights to this house. It cannot be sold without my consent. And even then, the proceeds would remain in the trust. I turned to the next page. This is the amendment Rachel has prepared, naming Janet as successor trustee, effective immediately. You'll notice you're specifically excluded, Michael. Your father was concerned about undue influence. Lisa snatched up the papers, her eyes scanning frantically. This can't be legal. When was this signed? Were there witnesses? You could have been coerced. Rachel calmly took the documents back. The original trust was established 5 years ago, with all proper legal protocols observed. The amendment we're signing today simply changes the successor trustee. Everything else remains as Robert Wilson intended to protect his wife's interests and ensure she always has a home. Michael sank back onto the sofa, looking stunned. Dad did this. He didn't trust me with your care. The hurt in his voice nearly broke my resolve, but I thought of all the times he'd dismissed my wishes these past months. Your father loved you, Michael, but he was realistic about vulnerabilities. I couldn't bring myself to be more specific with Lisa glaring daggers at me. Michael turned to his wife. Did you know about this? Is that why you've been pushing so hard about the house? Lisa's expression shifted from anger to calculation in an instant. Of course not, honey. I'm just as surprised as you are. She placed a hand on his knee. But this changes nothing about our concerns for your mother's welfare. Trust or no trust, she still shouldn't be living alone in this big house. Rachel interjected smoothly. Actually, Mrs. Wilson has options beyond staying here alone. The trust allows for home health care if needed, companions, even modifications to the property to accommodate changing needs, all paid for from trust assets, which are considerable. Lisa's head snapped up. What assets? What are you talking about? Rachel looked to me for permission, and I nodded. In addition to the residence trust, Robert Wilson established an irrevocable trust for Margaret's care and maintenance. The current value is approximately $1.2 million, conservatively managed to provide income throughout her lifetime. The room fell silent. Michael stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Mom, Dad left you that much money. Why didn't you ever say anything? I met my son's eyes, feeling a profound sadness, because it wasn't relevant until now. I didn't need it. All I wanted was my family, my home, and my dignity. I turned to Lisa, whose expression had frozen in a mask of disbelief. I don't need to sell my house. I don't need to move to Sunny Pines, and I don't need to be managed like an inconvenient problem. Lisa stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. This is ridiculous. We're trying to help you, and you're acting like we're the enemy. Michael, let's go. But Michael didn't move. He was still staring at the documents on the table. Dad really thought I couldn't be trusted. The pain in his voice reached something deep inside me. He thought you might be influenced by someone who didn't have your best interests at heart. Or mine. I glanced meaningfully at Lisa, who was practically vibrating with impatience by the door. Michael followed my gaze, and something seemed to click into place. He turned back to the documents. Can I see the original trust agreement? All of it. Rachel pulled out a thicker file. This is Mrs. Wilson's copy. You're welcome to review it here. Michael took it, flipping through pages with increasing focus. Lisa marched back to the sofa. Michael, we don't have time for this. We're going to be late for dinner with the Andersons. He didn't look up. Go without me. This is important. When she didn't move, he finally raised his head. Lisa, go. I need to talk to my mother. Something passed between them, a silent battle of wills that, for once, Michael seemed to win. Lisa stormed out, the front door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the pictures on my wall. Rachel discreetly gathered her things. I'll leave you two to talk. Margaret, we can finalize the amendment another time. After she left, Michael and I sat in silence. He continued reading, occasionally shaking his head or sighing. Finally, he closed the file and looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Dad knew, didn't he? Somehow, he knew I might. That I could be. He couldn't finish the sentence. I reached across the table and took his hand. Your father knew you have a generous heart. That you always want to see the best in people. He considered it your greatest strength and your greatest vulnerability. Michael's hand tightened around mine. Lisa's been talking about this house since before we were even engaged, he admitted quietly. At first, it was just comments about what a great location it is, how much potential it has. Then, after the wedding, she started suggesting you might be happier somewhere smaller, easier to manage. He rubbed his face. I told myself we were thinking of your well-being. But she's been pushing harder lately, talking about renovations, calculating values. Last week, she had an architect draw up plans to expand the master's suite. I didn't even question it. I felt a wave of compassion for my son, mixed with lingering hurt. Why, Michael? Why were you so quick to dismiss what I wanted? He couldn't meet my eyes. I don't know. Lisa can be very convincing. She makes her ideas sound like the only logical option. And somewhere along the way, I started seeing you through her eyes, as a problem to solve rather than my mother to respect. The honesty of his admission hung between us, painful, but necessary. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know how I let things get this far. The weeks that followed were difficult but healing. Michael and I began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship, starting with weekly dinners, just the two of us. Lisa refused to visit, claiming my hostility made her uncomfortable. I considered this a blessing. Janet returned home after making me promise to call her immediately if that real estate vulture tries anything else. Rachel helped me understand all the protections Robert had put in place and taught me how to manage my finances independently. For the first time since becoming a widow, I felt truly in control of my life. 3 months after the confrontation in my living room, Michael called and asked to come over. When he arrived, he looked both exhausted and somehow lighter than I'd seen him in years. Lisa and I are getting divorced, he said without preamble, as he sat at my kitchen table. I set a cup of tea in front of him, fighting to keep my expression neutral. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it despite everything. No mother wants to see her child in pain. He gave a hollow laugh. Are you? Because everyone else who knows her is telling me I've had a narrow escape. I sat across from him, choosing my words carefully. I'm sorry you're hurting. Marriage is sacred, and divorce is always painful. He nodded, staring into his tea. I found something on her computer. She's been having an affair with her broker for almost a year. But that's not even why I'm leaving. He looked up at me, his eyes clear and determined in a way that reminded me powerfully of his father. I'm leaving because I finally saw who she really is, who I was becoming because of her. The way she talked about you, about this house like you, were just obstacles to be removed. I keep thinking about what would have happened if Dad hadn't protected you with that trust. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. But he did protect me, and now you're protecting yourself. Michael stayed late that night. We talked more honestly than we had in years about his father, about his marriage, about the future. As he was leaving, he paused at the door. Mom, would it be okay if I came over on Sunday to help with the yard work? Dad used to do that for you, and I'd like to start doing that again. I hugged him tight, feeling like I was getting my son back, one small gesture at a time. In the year since that day, much has changed. Michael's divorce was finalized, messy but necessary. Lisa fought for everything she could get but ultimately had to settle for less than she'd hoped. The prenuptial agreement Robert had insisted upon proved its worth. Michael moved to a small apartment closer to my neighborhood and comes over twice a week for dinner. He's dating again, cautiously, a kind pediatric nurse named Sarah who asks about my garden and actually listens to the answers. Janet visits more often, pleased with the restoration of our family bonds. As for me, I've found my voice, the one Lisa claimed I didn't have. I volunteer at a senior advocacy center, helping others understand their rights and options. I've made new friends through a community garden program, teaching younger people the skills my generation took for granted. Last month, I updated my own estate plan with Rachel's help. Michael will inherit eventually, but with thoughtful protections in place, not because I don't trust him, but because I've learned the hard way that vulnerability doesn't mean helplessness. Having boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes when I'm in my garden, tending the rose bushes Robert planted for our 25th anniversary, I think about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't found Rachel's card, if Janet hadn't pushed me to stand up for myself, if Robert hadn't had the foresight to protect me from a threat he wouldn't live to see. I think about all the older women I've met through my volunteer work who weren't so fortunate, who lost their homes, their savings, their dignity to family members who saw them as burdens rather than treasures. And I make a silent promise to keep sharing my story. So now I'm asking you, yes, you listening to my voice right now, what would you do if someone tried to take your voice away? Would you find the courage to speak up? Would you recognize the warning signs I missed for so long? I hope you never face what I faced. But if you do, remember, it's never too late to stand your ground. It's never too late to reclaim your power. And sometimes, the most important voice to listen to is your own. If my story resonates with you, or if you know someone facing similar struggles with family members who see them as obstacles rather than people, share this with them. Save it for yourself as a reminder that age doesn't equal powerlessness. And remember that sometimes the quietest document can silence the loudest bully. I'm Margaret Wilson, speaking to you from my own living room, in my own house, where I plan to stay for as long as I choose. Thank you for listening to my story.